Hello and welcome everybody. So today I'll be continuing with the topic pathologies of the uterus, and I'll be covering two topics today. First is endometrial hyperplasia and the second is endometrial carcinoma. So endometrial hyperplasia, as the name suggests, endometrial hyperplasia is hyperplasia of the endometrial tissue. That is, there will be increased number of endometrial glands, proliferation of endometrial glands as compared to the stroma, and this results in increased gland to stroma ratio as compared to the normal proliferative phase endometrium. So in proliferative phase also there is increase in the number of glands, but in endometrial hyperplasia there will be more increase in the number of glands and more increase in gland to stroma ratio. So in this figure you can see these are the glands in the endometrial stroma, and there is increased number of glands as compared to the stroma, resulting in increased gland to stroma ratio. So the endometrial hyperplasia is different from the proliferative phase endometrium in two ways. First, there is increased number of glands as compared to the proliferative phase endometrium, and secondly, these glands are variable in size and shape as compared to the proliferative phase endometrium. So why it's important to know about endometrial hyperplasia? So it is important because endometrial hyperplasia is an important cause of abnormal uterine bleeding. There can be increased menses like menorrhagia, or there can be metrorrhagia, abnormal uterine bleeding, and it can also act as a precursor for endometrial carcinoma. So this point is very important, that endometrial hyperplasia can lead to certain types of endometrial carcinomas, and this fact also has a molecular basis, because in both endometrial hyperplasia and endometrial carcinoma there are certain common genetic alterations. Now we come to the causes of endometrial hyperplasia. So endometrial hyperplasia, that is increase in the number of endometrial glands and increased gland to stroma ratio, it is because of prolonged and unopposed estrogenic stimulation. So in which conditions this prolonged estrogenic stimulation can occur? First is anovulation. So we already know that ovulation occurs on the 14th day of menstrual cycle, and after ovulation corpus luteum is formed, which releases progesterone. So it opposes the effects of estrogen. But when a patient has chronic anovulation, then ovulation does not occur and there is no progesteronic effect. So there is unopposed estrogenic stimulation of the endometrium, which results in increased glandular proliferation of the endometrium. Second is increased estrogen production from endogenous sources. For example, there is an ovarian tumor called granulosa cell tumor. It will release estrogen. So that can also cause estrogenic stimulation of the endometrium. Third is exogenous estrogen. So when do we give exogenous estrogen to a patient? We give it in case of postmenopausal women when she has worrisome postmenopausal symptoms. So hormonal replacement therapy is given, and in that estrogen is given. So this can lead to prolonged estrogenic stimulation of the endometrium, leading to endometrial hyperplasia. So now we let's see the associated conditions with endometrial hyperplasia. So these are the associated risk factors, and in all these conditions there is increased estrogen in the body. There is hyperestrogenism. So first is obesity. Obesity, in this there is increased peripheral conversion of androgens to estrogen under the influence of enzyme aromatase. So increased estrogen levels in the body occur. Second is polycystic ovarian syndrome. In this syndrome there are multiple cysts in the ovaries, but there is no ovulation. There is chronic anovulation. Additionally, there is also increased androgen in the body, which also converts to estrogen with the help of enzyme aromatase. So there is hyperestrogenic state in the body. Third is anovulation. This I have explained earlier. Next is functioning granulosa cell tumors of the ovary, in which the granulosa cells, the tumorous granulosa cells, they secrete the estrogen. These are the functional tumors of the ovary, which are associated with endometrial hyperplasia. Next is prolonged administration of estrogenic substances like estrogen replacement therapy given in case of postmenopausal women. And another important point is that all these factors, they are also of pathogenic significance in case of some endometrial carcinomas, as we will study later on. Now, the molecular basis of endometrial hyperplasia, there is inactivation of a tumor suppressor gene called PTEN. PTEN is a tumor suppressor gene. It is inactivated in 20% of the cases of endometrial hyperplasia, and this mutation is also seen in case of endometrial carcinoma in 30 to 80% of the cases. So this proves that endometrial hyperplasia can act as a precursor lesion for endometrial carcinoma, and this genetic mutation is important. Now next, diagnosis. So how do we diagnose a case of endometrial hyperplasia? The patient will come with abnormal vaginal bleeding, and then investigations are done. The two investigations are important. First is ultrasound. So in ultrasonography, transvaginal sonography is preferred, in which a USG probe is inserted through the vagina and the information is collected regarding the thickness of the endometrium. So normal thickness of the endometrium is less than 5 millimeters. In endometrial hyperplasia, this thickness will be increased. So it's an important sign that now biopsy should be done. So confirmation of endometrial hyperplasia is by endometrial biopsy followed by the histopathological examination. So a curate can be used to take the endometrial curatings, and histopathological examination will be done. And guidance of hysteroscope can be taken. Hysteroscope is an instrument which can help to visualize the endometrial cavity. And with the hysteroscopic guidance, biopsy can be taken. After that, it will be sent for histopathological examination. Now, WHO has earlier classified endometrial hyperplasia in 4 classes, but now it has collapsed that classification in 2014 into 2 classes, just 2 classes. So it has simplified the classification of endometrial hyperplasia recently, and there are 2 classes. First is non-atypical hyperplasia, as second is atypical hyperplasia. So it has made the classification simpler, and there are some criteria based on which we classify the hyperplasia as non-atypical or atypical. Atypical hyperplasia is also known as endometrial intraepithelial neoplasia. So first, let us see what are the criteria for non-atypical hyperplasia. So as the name suggests, it is non-atypical. It does not have atypia. It is due to estrogenic effect, so there will be proliferation of the glands. So in this picture, you see a low power view of the endometrium. This is endometrial lining, and this is the endometrial stroma. It has some hemorrhage here, and these round structures with the central lumen. These are the endometrial glands. So you see that the endometrial glands, they are increased in number and they are variable in their sizes. So there is increased in gland to stroma ratio. So this is the first point, increase in gland to stroma ratio. Second point, the glands are variable in size and shape. And this is the higher power view, and here you can see these are the glands which are crowded. There is increase in gland to stroma ratio. In some of the glands you can see stratification, but there is no feature of atypia in the nucleus, in the cells. And another important point is that how many cases can progress to endometrial carcinoma. So only in 1 to 3% of cases, and non-atypical hyperplasia will progress to adenocarcinoma. So if a patient shows you her report of endometrial biopsy and it states that she has non-atypical hyperplasia, so you can counsel the patient that there are only 1 to 3% chances that she can have endometrial carcinoma. So only regular checkups will suffice in her follow-up. Now next is atypical hyperplasia. So name suggests that it will be having atypia. It is also known as endometrial intraepithelial neoplasia, just like we had studied CI and SIN. So it is endometrial intraepithelial neoplasia, EIN. So it has 3 important features. First is the glands which are proliferating. They were also seen in non-atypical hyperplasia, but here they will display nuclear atypia. Nuclear atypia is an important feature. The second feature important is that the glands, they are lying back to back with little intervening stroma. The stroma will be less and the glands will be lying back to back and they will be showing crowding. And third is that the glands are complex and they show branching patterns. So let us see in the pictures. So this is the first picture. It shows these are the glands in the endometrium, and there is the little stroma in between. So gland to stroma ratio is increased, and just see these glands, they are also lying back to back. So there is crowding of the glands, and the glands, they show branching pattern. See, the lumina is not regular. So glands are also showing branching pattern, and the lining cells, they are showing atypia. So let us see another figure. Here we can see the features which are seen in this in this atypical hyperplasia. So you see that the individual cells here, they are rounded. Normally, what is seen in the pseudostratified columnar epithelium, the nuclei, they are elongated and they are touching the basement membrane and they are perpendicular to the basement membrane. But here you can see that the nuclei, they are rounded, and cells, they have lost their original perpendicular orientation to the basement membrane. In addition, the nucleus, it has a vesicular chromatin. Vesicular chromatin means that nuclear details can be seen, and additionally there is prominent nucleoli. So you can see in this figure, in the inset, this figure, this is of normal endometrium. So you can compare the glands of the normal endometrium and the glands of the atypical endometrial hyperplasia. See, this glands, it has an irregular lumen because it is a branching gland, and these are the nuclei. They are showing pleomorphism and vesicular nuclei, prominent nucleoli, and very scanty stroma which is present in between the glands. And a very important point is that in 23 to 48% of the cases, atypical endometrial hyperplasia shows carcinoma on hysterectomy. So it has high chances of progressing to an endometrial carcinoma. So if a patient has atypical hyperplasia, mostly she is postmenopausal, so hysterectomy is done as a treatment. Now the key points of endometrial hyperplasia. So endometrial hyperplasia, it is defined as increase in the number of glands relative to the stroma. There is increased gland to stroma ratio. The glands show crowding and they are variable in size and shape. Next, it is most commonly caused by unopposed estrogenic stimulation, and it is an important cause of abnormal vaginal bleeding. It is divided into two classes by WHO. First is non-atypical hyperplasia and other is atypical hyperplasia, and this division is based on nuclear atypia. And atypical hyperplasia is associated with increased risk of endometrial carcinoma in 23 to 48% of cases. And important mutation is mutation of PTEN tumor suppressor gene, which is seen in approximately 20% of endometrial hyperplasia. So this was all about endometrial hyperplasia. Now next we come to the cancers of the body of the uterus. So the cancers can arise from two parts of the uterus. First is the tumors which arise from the glands. They are called endometrial carcinoma, and the tumor which arise from the endometrial stroma, they are called stromal sarcomas. So I shall tell you about the carcinoma of the endometrium. So carcinoma of the endometrium accounts for 7% of all invasive cancers of women, and this carcinoma is on a rise in females because the carcinoma cervix is on a decline. It's because of effective screening measures, and but the carcinoma endometrium has become more common than the carcinoma cervix. And worldwide, approximately 2,80,000 new cases are occurring of endometrial carcinoma per year. Now endometrial carcinoma, it is classified into two broad categories. First is type 1 and second is type 2. So type 1 is estrogen dependent and type 2 is non-estrogen dependent. So there is a table of comparison between type 1 and type 2 endometrial carcinoma given in Robbins. So age incidence is 55 to 65 years for type 1 endometrial carcinoma, and type 2 endometrial carcinoma occurs in a elderly age group, in a more elderly age group, which is 10 years more than this type 1, 65 to 75 years age group. Now clinical setting is important to identify. So unopposed estrogenic stimulation, it is the most important factor for type 1 endometrial carcinoma. So there will be history of endometrial hyperplasia. There can be preceding endometrial hyperplasia in the endometrium of the patient. Then obesity, hypertension, diabetes, these are associated factors for type 1. In comparison, in type 2, we see endometrial atrophy. It occurs in a setting of endometrial atrophy and there is no estrogenic stimulation and patient has a thin physique. Then for morphology, the type 1 most common morphology is endometrioid. The glands are similar to that seen in the normal endometrium. So there is just glandular proliferation. While in type 2, there are different morphologies seen, different histologic types. First is serous, clear cell, mixed Mullerian tumor, and most common morphology is serous. Precursor lesion in case of type 1 is endometrial hyperplasia, while in type 2 it is serous endometrial intraepithelial carcinoma. Now next is the mutated genes. Mutated genes for type 1 are P10, then ARID1A, PIK3CA, which are oncogenic protein, then KRAS, FGF2, MSI, microsatellite instability gene, TP53. While most common gene mutated in type 2 is TP53, and other mutations are aneuploidy, PIK3CA mutations, and so on. So important genetic mutations you have to learn are P10 for type 1 and TP53 for type 2. And the behavior of this tumor, so type 1 is indolent while type 2 is a aggressive tumor. So type 1 has a good prognosis while type 2 has a poor prognosis, and type 1 spreads via lymphatics, and type 2 also has an intraperitoneal spread. Now we come to the details of type 1 endometrial carcinoma. So type 1 is most common type of carcinoma, and constitute about 80% of the cases of the endometrial carcinoma, and it is also called endometrioid carcinoma because the morphology resembles the normal endometrial glands, means there is glandular proliferation. So this is called endometrioid carcinoma. It arises in a setting of endometrial hyperplasia. So this is quite clear to you because it occurs in a setting of estrogenic stimulation and arises in a setting of endometrial hyperplasia, and precursor lesion will be atypical endometrial hyperplasia. And the risk factors are also similar as in case of endometrial hyperplasia, like obesity, then diabetes, hypertension, infertility, and unopposed estrogenic stimulation. So there is a mnemonic for remembering the risk factors of endometrial carcinoma. This is ENDOMET. So E stands for elderly patient, and for nullipara. So nullipara has more exposure of estrogen. And nullipara means a woman who has not given birth to a child. So when somebody is pregnant, then there is 9 months of progesterone exposure because corpus luteum is persistent in case of pregnancy. So she has 9-month protection with progesterone exposure. There is no estrogen effect in pregnancy. So nullipara is more exposed to estrogen as compared to a person who has given birth to a child. So nullipara is a risk factor. Then diabetes, obesity I explained earlier. Then menstrual irregularities, estrogen therapy like hormonal replacement therapy, and hypertension. So this is a mnemonic you can learn to understand the risk factors of carcinoma endometrium. And important point is that any factor that rises the level or time of exposure to estrogen is a risk factor for type 1 endometrial carcinoma. So type 1 endometrial carcinoma is directly related to the estrogenic exposure. Now these are some mutations which are common in type 1 endometrial carcinoma. So there is progressive accumulation of these mutations, and these will morphology will also change progressively, like there is proliferative endometrium, P10 mutation occurs, there will be non-atypical hyperplasia, then these mutation occurs, KRAS and MSI, so atypical hyperplasia occurs, and after that there is further accumulation of more mutations, and there is occurrence of endometrioid carcinoma. So all these mutations, they have a role in increased cell signaling through the pathway, through the PIK3-AKT pathway. So there is sequencing of the genomes of type 1 endometrioid carcinoma, and it has shown that the most common mutations, all these mutations which I stated in the previous slide, they increase the signaling through the PI3K-AKT pathway. This is a signal transduction pathway. It causes increased proliferation in the cell cycle, and it is a hallmark for this particular tumor type. So this can be an important MCQ also. So all these act through this mechanism that there is increased signaling through the PI3K-AKT pathway. Now there are two syndromes, this is also important for MCQ and Viva, that there are two syndromes in which there is increased incidence of carcinoma endometrium. So what are those two syndromes? First is Cowden syndrome. In Cowden syndrome, it is caused due to P10 mutation, gene mutation. So in Cowden syndrome, a syndrome is a constellation of signs and symptoms. So there are multiple signs and symptoms. In Cowden, there is multiple hematomatous polyps in the GIT, then mucocutaneous lesions like oral mucosal papillomas, and there are palmoplantar keratosis and tricholemomas which are the benign tumors of hair follicles, and it is associated with increased risk of endometrial carcinoma and also breast carcinoma. And second syndrome is Lynch syndrome, hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer. This is an autosomal dominant disorder, and there is mutation of DNA mismatch repair gene, and 80% of the patient develop colorectal carcinoma. and they also show increased risk of endometrial carcinoma in 33% of the cases. So these are the two syndrome, Cowden syndrome and Lynch syndrome, which shows there is increased incidence of carcinoma endometrium. Now clinically, the type 1 endometrial carcinoma, the peak age is 55 to 65 years, and it is uncommon in women who are less than 40 years of age. And the clinical symptom will be, there will be abnormal postmenopausal bleeding per vaginum. Diagnosis is by ultrasonography. Transvaginal sonography is preferred over transabdominal sonography, and confirmation will be done by histopathology of the endometrial biopsy. Now in morphology, morphology means how the lesion will look grossly and how it will be looking microscopically. So grossly, the tumor can either be polypoid. Polypoid means it is growing outwards into the endometrial cavity. It will be obliterating the lumen of the endometrium, or there can be infiltrative growth. The growth can be infiltrative. Infiltrative, like in this case, see, the growth is growing towards the wall, reaching up to the myometrium. So this is the infiltrative growth, and this is the polypoidal growth. So as the tumor grows, it spreads from the endometrium to the myometrium, then to the adjacent structures, then to regional lymph nodes, and ultimately to distant sites like lung, liver, and bone. So there are two patterns of growth. First is polypoidal or exophytic growth, and second is infiltrative growth. In microscopy, here it is called endometrioid tumor, means there is glandular proliferation. So glands are proliferating, and there are three grades of this tumor. First is well differentiated, where there is just proliferation of glands, there is no solid component. While in moderately differentiated, there is well formed gland along with solid component, which constitutes less than 50% of the tumor. And third category is, like grade 3, is poorly differentiated endometrioid carcinoma with solid component of more than 50%. So let us take a look at these pictures to understand this. So in well differentiated endometrioid carcinoma, there will be increased proliferation of gland. There is increased gland to stroma ratio, and there is no stroma in between the glands. The glands are just lying back to back, and the stroma is missing between the glands. So this is well differentiated endometrioid carcinoma, no solid component. In moderately differentiated, there are glands. See, there are some irregular glands here. Glands, and these glands are lined by the atypical cells. And there will be some solid areas like this, where there will be proliferation of the cells in the form of sheets like this. This is a solid area, but the solid area will be less than 50% of the total tumor. While in poorly differentiated carcinomas, which are also called grade 3 endometrioid carcinomas, there the solid pattern, see, these cells, these are present in the form of sheets. Few glands are there, but majority is in the form of sheets. So there is a solid pattern, and the solid growth will be more than 50% of the total tumor. So these are the three grades of endometrioid carcinoma, and it determines the prognosis of the patient. Now diagnosis. So diagnosis, first history, then physical examination. History may abnormal postmenopausal bleeding, then physical examination, per speculum examination can be done. Then in blood counts, complete blood count, because there is bleeding in the patient, so hemoglobin might be low, so we do CBC. Then ultrasound, transvaginal sonography is preferred. We see the endometrial thickness, we see if any growth is present in the endometrium. Then if the growth is present or endometrial thickness is increased, then we do the endometrial biopsy, and assisted with hysteroscopy. So hysteroscopy, with hysteroscopy and endometrial biopsy combined, it is the gold standard. So with the help of hysteroscope, we visualize the endometrial cavity and then take endometrial biopsy, send it for histopathological examination. So by that the diagnosis will be confirmed. So there are certain ways by which the occurrence of endometrial carcinoma can be prevented. First is controlling obesity, blood pressure, diabetes, because these are risk factors for developing endometrial carcinoma. Then in the postmenopausal females, restricted use of estrogen should be done, and preferably estrogen should be given along with progesterone. Estrogen should not be given alone. It should be supplemented with progesterone, which will oppose the effect of estrogen on the endometrium. So if the woman has any complaint of vaginal bleeding, abnormal vaginal bleeding, then she should immediately report to the doctor. Now next is type 2 or type 2 endometrial carcinoma. It constitutes 15% of the cases of endometrial carcinoma, and occurs in women about 10 years older than those with type 1 carcinoma. So the age group is older than that of type 1 carcinomas. It arises in the setting of endometrial atrophy and it is not dependent on estrogen. This is very important, and it arises in a setting of endometrial atrophy. The type 1 was arising in a setting of endometrial hyperplasia, and this is arising in a setting of endometrial atrophy. So type 2 tumors, they are grade 3. They are already grade 3 and they are poorly differentiated and they have a very poor prognosis. Some histologic types that are seen in type 2 endometrial carcinomas are serous, which is the most common histologic type of type 2 carcinoma, then clear cell carcinoma, and malignant mixed Mullerian tumor. So important mutation which is seen in type 2 is TP53. So it is seen in at least 90% of serous endometrial carcinoma. So you have to remember this mutation TP53, which is important mutation seen in type 2 endometrial serous carcinoma. Now again in type 2 carcinomas also the mutation accumulate and then they lead to the serous carcinoma. So in microscopy, in type 1 endometrial carcinoma we saw that there is proliferation of glands, and in type 2 endometrial carcinoma there is papillary growth pattern. So what are papilla? Papilla are thin fibrovascular cores over which the epithelial cells are arranged. So I have marked here, see, this is the fibrovascular cores. This is the fibrovascular core, and over the fibrovascular cores the cells are arranged, and these cells show marked atypia because they are poorly differentiated. They show marked atypia. And what are the features of what are the cellular features of atypia? The cells will be having high NC ratio, scanty cytoplasm, and high nuclear to cytoplasmic ratio. Then mitotic figures, hyperchromasia. You see, they are so much blue. They are hyperchromatic, and they will be pleomorphic. There will be loss of polarity, and they will show prominent nucleoli. So there is papillary pattern of growth. The papilla are seen, and over them the cells are arranged, and these cells show atypical features. So here the papilla, they are seen in longitudinal section, and in this picture you can see the same papilla, they are seen in transverse section. In the center there is a fibrovascular core. Over this, these cells are arranged and these cells are showing atypical features. Again, these are the papilla in transverse section. See this. Another important point is on immunohistochemical examination, there is increased P53 expression in the nuclei of these cells of serous endometrial carcinomas. So this can also be an important MCQ. So, and that in ISC P53 overexpression is seen in the nucleus. Now lastly, the prognosis and treatment. The prognosis will depend on the clinical stage at the time of diagnosis. So stage 1 means the tumor is confined to the body of the uterus, corpus uterus, in the body of uterus only. In stage 2, it involves the uterus along with the cervix. In stage 3, it will extend beyond the uterus but not outside the true pelvis, and stage 4 will show beyond the true pelvis, and it will involve the mucosa of the bladder or the rectum. So these are the stages, and as the stage will increase, the prognosis will become poorer. And treatment options are surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. It will depend on the grade and stage of the tumor. So the salient features of endometrial carcinoma. Endometrial carcinoma, most common malignancy of female genital tract, and there are two major types of endometrial carcinomas, type 1, type 2. Type 1, they are low grade and they have better prognosis, they are indolent, while type 2, they are very aggressive tumors and they have a very poor prognosis. Endometrioid carcinoma type 1 is preceded by atypical endometrial hyperplasia, and common mutations seen in type 1 are PTEN, PIK3CA, KRAS and ARID1A genes. Type 2 carcinoma, most common is serous, is associated with serous endometrial intraepithelial carcinoma. This is the precursor lesion, and most common mutation is TP53 mutation. And most important factor in the prognosis and outcome of the disease is stage. And serous tumors, they are more likely to present at an advanced stage and they have a worse prognosis as compared to type 1 endometrial carcinoma. So these are the differences. Thank you very much for listening.